First, I want to thank everybody for all your support and all of your sending around Oakland News Now posts and everything. But it's my pleasure to introduce my longtime friend, Treva Reid, who I'm just going to say this is an endorsement vlog, okay? Because she, more than anyone else running, is ready to be Oakland City Council District 7 representative. She has been for some time. She understands one thing that no one else running really understands, and it's called governance. But I want, and I said it's less me talking, more of her. Treva, first of all, welcome, and tell my viewers what motivated you to run, to begin with, and what's your candidacy all about?
Sure.
Like I know, but
I know you know. I mean, but there may be some things that you may not know as much as I talk about just, a part of my family connection with civil service and public service. But for me and my family, it really started with my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother, Emma May Reed, was the only child, and she had 12 children. And of those 12 children, she had my great-grandmother, who is the oldest daughter, and my grandmother had my father. And so my father was my great-grandmother's oldest grandchild. And she showed up strong with her 4-foot self in community, serving from the household with her 12 children and her husband in a 2-bedroom, coal-fired home. And she just had a strength of resilience. And so I learned growing up watching my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my father, my mother really show up strong, serving from the home to community to church. And my great-grandmother was a precinct captain. So my father was her oldest grandchild. And so she took him everywhere that she served in community. And a lot of that was showing up and really advocating for the voice of community. And that was really instilled in me at an early age. I am the oldest born granddaughter of now like 129 cousins. I honestly continue to lose track of how many cousins I have. There are, on that side, just under my father's 10 siblings. Now, that's not even including my great-grandmother's other 11 children and all the cousins that I have from them. You're in Georgia. Our family is from Eaton, Georgia, on that side of the family. So we've got some deep Georgia roots there. But I was one of the oldest grandchildren. So that came with a lot of responsibility, a lot of opportunity to learn how to navigate through people and personality and issues, and in the face of poverty and just a lot of just family instability and challenges. And so for me, I've been serving since I was raised up in the home, serving in the community. And it was in middle school that my history teacher really gave me a perspective of serving outside of the family responsibility and family opportunities to go serve in community and help other people and support other people and strengthen them. The history teacher at that time, gave an opportunity for us to partner with some churches that were serving the unhoused community. And I would walk after school to Soup Kitchen and another shelter to help serve and feed families. And that became a personal commitment to me. And that commitment continued to grow. In high school, in college, I'm a part now of over 10 organizations where I serve and show up in community. Satellite Affordable Housing, the Crucible Advisory Committee, community education partnerships where we serve families and children who are unhoused or highly mobile, just like I was growing up. And so I really show up in community. East Oakland Youth Development Center. I know you are probably more familiar with these organizations and maybe some of the guests who are listening in. Youth Alive, which we focus on violence intervention, prevention, and healing and trauma care. And so all of those organizations that I serve in are deeply connected to life experiences that I've lived or maybe living now. And that's just who I am. It's the nature of what I was raised to do. And I have just enjoyed doing that. Not necessarily so public. You probably didn't even know, may not know or aware of the organizations that I serve with, because I was just raised that you get in, you help, you serve, you bring strategy, you bring the best of who you are to help other people have what they need and bring that strength of resilience that I've been able to hold on to help people triumph in every season of their life. And that's the spirit of what I bring in running for Oakland City Council, to lead transformative and sustained change in our city, as I've seen in other organizations.
What was the aha moment? Because I always ask her is what you just said of all that you've experienced, where you just said, all right, I'm going to face my fear, because we all have a fear of campaigning. I certainly have. But what's the aha moment where you just said, I'm going to break through the wall and just do it?
It came in 2018. And for me, you know me, I have deep roots in my faith. And it was a moment of coming face to face with me wrestling. I have watched the deep commitment of public service all my life, and I have seen the cost of public service. My parents were married, my parents were divorced, my parents remarried, my parents divorced again. And so a lot of some of the experiences that I've lived with, having a parent who was serving and showing up strong in community, there were other aspects of that, that we felt in the home. And even seeing, in my father, who's an elected official, the last 2 times that he's run, he's had heart surgery going into those campaigns. And so I certainly didn't take it lightly, the opportunity to serve. And it was in 2018, while visiting with my godfather, who's a pastor, that he called me out and he gave me an incredible word from God. And it basically was, stop wrestling with God. That I have been trying to run away from this deep commitment that I have had in me to serve at a greater level of community involvement and public service by trying to serve in so many other areas. So instead of doing the one thing that I may have been called to do and stepping out to run, I've tried to find 12 other organizations to serve in, to support, with hopes that I may never have to do what I'm doing today, because my heart has really just been to serve. It's not been to show up for any type of notoriety. It's certainly not been to live the weight of the sacrifices that I've seen and have felt, even being closely knitted. I've worked for an elected official, Nancy Skinner, who's our state senator now, and I have seen the great work and cost, and it is not an easy path. But that aha moment was really God speaking to me about stop wrestling, right? In my faith, if you are going to walk in relationship means stepping out in faith and obedience. And he also gave me another word, that your reputation is not on the line, but your calling is. It's not about what people will say or think about you in relationship to your family and their service, but this is a real defining moment for you, that you cannot be who I've called you to be until you step out and have the courage to walk out something that you have tried to find many other paths to do. And this is where I am now. And so that was probably the final aha moment. I've had many aha moments in the process, but I was wrestling with those aha moments. But that was a defining moment in November 2018, where it was just like, yes, we're going to do it. Now let's go. What are the next steps that I need to do in really walking it out? You mentioned in times past, in 2014, you saw that I had filed to run. And it was in 2014 that I had a conversation with my father, and he was saying that he was going to leave office. And I was working then for Nancy Skinner when she was in the state assembly. And it didn't seem really for me the ideal time, but it was that moment, like, well, if he's going to step away, then I'm going to step up at this time. And I'm honestly grateful that that time didn't happen. I have certainly encouraged, my father to run and finish strong in the direction that he was called to do. And so I've never pushed or pried. I've stayed focused where I needed to stay focused. But in this season, when that door opened again, it was time. And I do believe, as you said, that I am the best leader. I'm an overcomer. I'm an advocate. I'm a community leader. And I've been fighting. I fight for families like mine now who have endured, like us, the deep trauma of losing a loved one to gun violence. I fight for families now who are overcoming housing instability, food insecurity, unemployment, domestic abuse, relying on deeply affordable housing, working to keep their business doors open, to have mental health care. All of those things that I fight for are part of my life journey, my life experience, are where I show up in community now. And we need a passionate, strong, experienced leader who can not just connect with the policy aspects of it and the governance aspect of it, but truly have a heart of compassion to be able to hear and work in community with those who are experiencing these areas the most, so that we can truly create effective policies in relationship to where we are with community to really see that type of transformation and allocation of funding and dismantling of systemic racism that we have been under the weight of, even in a city like Oakland.
What? I have to say candidly too that I was a little upset with Larry. He didn't.
What happened? What?
I love him. This guy, dude, give her a chance. That was back in 2014.
You know, I mean, people will laugh about the number of times he said that he wasn't going to run. And honestly, as a daughter, I want my father to be healthy. I want my father to be alive.
Absolutely.
And so I have always looked through the lens of the daughter, is that if you are not healthy and you are not able to continue, then how do we help you to live and survive? Like I relocated back to Oakland in 2004 in that very fight for my father's health and life when it was not the greatest at that time. And so for me as a daughter, I don't really care about the position or the title. I just want my father to be here and to be well. And so in 2014, when he had made mention that it was his time due to just some of the health matters that were before him and just where he was processing, you know, I certainly honor my father. And if he was deciding that that was his time, then I needed to really take that moment to say, is this my time also? And so I filed with the intention of moving forward. And within a few months, as you know, my father, you know, he shifted that direction and he felt that he needed to commit longer. There were a number of things that he had been digging deep in and serving the community that he wanted to be a part of leading out in. And so I'm grateful that he made that decision to stay and to do his best in staying, enduring all that was before him to finish now in this season strong.
When you take office, what will be your first priorities? What do you want to get out of the way first? I mean, for example, like the little things I talked about governance, rather. What kind of staff will you have? What kind of people should apply? You know,
people that should apply. I mean, certainly Oaklander.
Yeah, that's a plus.
You got to be, you know, fully a part of our community, and you've got to be someone with a heart for the people, not just the policies, but someone who has a heart for the people and is in community with people now. That's something that you really can't train. You know, you need to have someone that's coming onto your team with the issues that are before us, that has been involved, that understands the issues, that can certainly affect change with policy, but really being able to show up to hear and be responsive with me in community, that is key. And so I believe that there will be an Oaklander who fits that level of leadership with experience, you know, in government, preferably, that can work alongside of me and work alongside with community to make sure that we stay at the table and that we coordinate effectively from my office into the community, from the community back to my office, and work with me to maintain accountability with community in leading and serving them.
And as far as,
and so I'm certainly our district is a community of color. You know, this district that we live in, it's predominantly Latinx and African American, and it's one of the last districts with a strong African American, you know, Black community. And so making sure that my staff is reflective of our community is equally important.
What among the problems do you want to tackle in District 7 first, given the coronavirus and everything else? What's on their priority list there?
I mean, there are a number of priorities when we look at District 7 and the city. I mean, certainly, you know, one of the things that's before the city now is where we are with how we allocate funding from our police department. Over $400 million is allocated to that department. We've not seen the type of representation from our police department. When we look at what's taken place over the city, what's taken place over the country, a lot of those issues of deep systemic racism and the culture of police, it's here too. And those are some of the things that we need to be honest about. And I believe that we're certainly working to address those. Those issues have come to light more in the midst of everything that's taken place nationally and locally. But looking at where we stand with our budget, that's going to be a critical thing. Many of us don't have the access and insight to some of that data that would be helpful to know how best to make decisions. And so being at the table to have access and opening up all the books to a number of these areas that we would like to progress, I think is going to be critical. I've got to see what's going on before us to know how best to determine the strategy and the approach to work to address the issues that we have. Public safety, so public safety would certainly be in areas like, where are we tracking against the goals? We've got these incredible task forces that are being launched. How are we doing with assessing ourselves and the metrics on how we're progressing with those goals, how we're progressing with decisions as it relates to what we're allocating? Public safety is a big issue for us in District 7 as it is for the city. I know you're away right now, but you hear about the loss of life, and it's a public health crisis for us. In Oakland, 60% of those who've lost their lives are also Black young men. And so the inequities of those who have lost life and the ripple effect of those who are impacted by the lack of public safety and the rising crime in areas, that's something that we have got to address immediately. I know that there are things in the work now with our police department and launching ceasefire strategies and efforts. We've got Reverend Demita, who is amazing, who's just come up into leadership in ceasefire. We have a new program called OPD Cares, and we've got to hold ourselves accountable to how we show up caring. How we show up caring with trauma-informed policing, how we show up with where and how we allocate the budget, how we continue to lift up our police commission. And there's a measure before us, Measure S1, that I support to ensure that they are strengthening that oversight and the staffing needed, and rewriting some of OPD's policies and holding them accountable. And so that's really where we stand as it relates to public safety. But that's a big one for me. I know the deep weight of that type of trauma and grief. My daughter's oldest brother, Brandon, was murdered at the age of 22. And I love Brandon as my son. And it was in the midst of working for Assemblymember Nancy Skinner, advocating for her gun violence packages, working to bring community together. Our faith leaders, our gun violence advocates here at the local level and the state level, that we were even pushing for one particular bill called AB 48, which was called her bullet bill, that Brandon's life was lost to one bullet. And so when we talk about public safety, we talk about how we reimagine public safety, how we invest equitably into violence intervention, prevention, and trauma and healing care, and these alternative methods of public safety measures. All of that is going to be very important to me as I sit at that table, and the decisions that will come out of that, and our responsiveness to how we show up in community around those items. So certainly public safety. Housing stability is one of the issues that it's so prevalent. It's before. It's like it's the issue that you see everywhere. There's so many people who have been displaced and evicted, and the majority of those are, again, Black people. And so when we look at some of the issues in Oakland, it's amazing to see in a community that certainly has been one that has been known to uplift the Black power movement and strengthen the lives of Black people, that we are faced as a Black community with a number of disparities that have put us at greater risk even during COVID, more so. And I'll have to give you a link to an article and calls to action that I lifted up in partnership with the Black Cultural Zone, Greenlining Institute, and as a member of BWAPA, Black Women Organized for Political Action. I serve as one of their state policy advisors, and we put out a call to action for our local and state and national leaders on some areas that we are demanding change as it relates to the Black community. And also the brown community, our communities of color. And so housing stability is something that you'll continually see me digging deep in. I serve on the board of Satellite Affordable Housing. I work now to make sure that we fund and source and finance a pipeline of housing, but we need housing now. We have to come up with creative solutions right now with the assets that we have in this city, or the ability to negotiate with assets that are available, getting people into permanent housing solutions and save quality temporary shelter as we work to prioritize those housing needs, and working in community with those who are unhoused to even know how best to show up to serve them and help to strengthen them as we work to bring that stability in their lives.
Hey, there's a person who has a question. Mind if I read it off to you? At least talk as if he lives in your district. Go goes, it's about pedestrian safety and bikes. And posted right here. Yeah, Ulysses Toledo. Holy Toledo. I'm sorry, Ulysses, but I think of Bill King when I see that last name. So if you're an Oaklander, you'll understand. It's a litmus test for you, my friend. Okay. It says our district needs safe streets for pedestrians and people on bikes. Do you have a plan?
We absolutely do. We do need safe streets. We need safe streets that not only for bikes in District 7, we need safe streets just to walk. We need walkable, safe, well-lit, clean streets, free of blight, illegal dumping, abandoned vehicles, safe pathways for pedestrians, being mindful as we create policies around road diets and changes that we bring community at the table. The Safe Streets Initiative was not initially launched with community involved. And so we've got to make sure that we bring community together around addressing the pedestrian and biker safety. We'd love to see more bike lanes and safe and the safety around us riding bikes in the community. Last week or the weekend before last, I partnered with an initiative called We Ride, We Vote. And so it was an initiative with a number of Black bikers that came out, and they talked about the poor road quality and how unsafe it was when they got to certain parts of the city, particularly out here in East Oakland. So we've got to make sure that the funding that has been approved, the 3-year paving plan, that we're on the first year of that paving plan, it's $100 million that was set aside for 100 million miles, that we allocate that funding and prioritize those phases equitably to make sure that our district in East Oakland is prioritized in parts of the community that may not be as noticeable, but still those communities desire bike lanes and pedestrian safety and crosswalks that are well lit and well marked. And so there are a number of things that we can do. We've got the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission. I'm fortunate that I have the endorsement of our District 7 and other district BPAC commissioners. And so I think making sure that we sit at the table, having those conversations as they're planning and they're doing master planning on a number of different issues, that we're getting their input, that we're listening to their recommendations, and we're allocating appropriately to deliver on those goals that we set forth.
And also, District 7, for those who may not know, who are watching this from, say, Thailand, is huge. It encompasses the Oakland Airport. It goes to Eastmont Mall. It goes up into the hills, Grass Valley, and a lot of history. But it's like it's like a city unto itself, you know? But in the middle of that, you have the Coliseum. And right, what are your thoughts about what the future of the Coliseum should be with respect to the Oakland Athletics? That is something that's been talked about a lot, but I'm asking the question deliberately open to find out what your thoughts about are.
The Coliseum is an incredible economic engine that we have here, and we are fortunate. I mean, that's at the beginning of coming into District 7. It starts around the Coliseum, and so we would love to see how that corridor can be a benefit, not just to the city, but to this district. And so I sat at those community meetings. I know you probably sat at a number of those community meetings. And my desire at that time, you sat at a lot of those. You probably sat at more than I did, because this is definitely—
I don't know about that part, but
definitely an area that you are passionate about. But I sat at those tables, honestly, with the hopes of just supporting the Oakland A's remaining at the Coliseum, with economic development around that corridor that ensured that a strong community of jobs and benefits, project labor agreements, environmental justice priorities that could come without displacing the residents, but open up doors of opportunity for economic vitality, for community vitality, for reinvestment into our community, for rezoning areas around that corridor that could be a higher and better use. And so I felt that having a sports engine at that Coliseum could be a great driver for us. And so I continue to be an advocate for the A's remaining at the Coliseum. We know that they're in a number of negotiations. I support those negotiations certainly being more favorable to where we are in East Oakland and invested in East Oakland and seeing the East Oakland corridor invested in more equitably than we have shown commitment in the past. So I think it's great that we have interest from the Mr. Ray Bobbitt and his group. I believe it's the African American Sports. Maybe you know the
yeah. You headed me off at the pass. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, well, the group that is looking to propose the Black-owned group that's looking to propose ownership for an NFL team, I think it's an incredible opportunity to look at their proposal, to support their proposal. It's really not just about keeping a team in Oakland, but it's just the opportunities that that team could bring to us in that corridor. It's a major transit hub that's already established there. A Coliseum specific plan was approved back in, I believe, 2014. And in that specific plan, it had a number of environmental reviews that were complete to focus on housing and focus on some other areas of development around the Coliseum corridor, around the Hagenberger corridor. And so making sure that we have a race and equity lens on what we allow to be established there and how it works to benefit our district and our community is going to be key, and maintain just some of the environmental regulations. I mean, we've just been so impacted in this district with environmental injustice that whatever comes there, it has to be something that shores up the community vitality and the health of us, financially, physically, financially having opportunities for ownership within this community that can get plugged in there. And so the African American Sports and Entertainment Committee, their interest is something that excites many of us. And we'd love to see an open and transparent process through the city to know what is being discussed as the city is now shifting its negotiations from the county having already secured its plans with the A's. I mean, the A's will own 50%. They own 50%. And so how whoever brings itself into that other 50% is going to be key with what they negotiate, how they negotiate, and making sure that it's a community-driven process with us at the table.
Yeah, a little news to break. Actually, Mr. Bobbitt's group and the A's are meeting tomorrow afternoon. There you go, little news tidbit there.
Well, I can't wait to see what they even visualize. I certainly was disheartened to see great visual plans brought up for the Howard Terminal area, and not that same visual element of getting us excited about what could be developed at the Coliseum and Hagenberger corridor. And so I hope that as they're meeting and these negotiations continue, that we can visualize the educational, the sports and entertainment museum that they've talked about, their jobs plan, having a strong jobs and housing agreement, the retail, the restaurant, the hotels, the ownership shares that they mentioned for a community that I think is similar to Green Bay's ownership structure there, but something that will truly benefit the city and East Oakland.
Shifting gears to
so you tell us what they talk about tomorrow. Let us know what comes out of those.
They tell me, sure, absolutely. Shifting gears to the homeless, are you satisfied with the city's homeless policy approach, and how do you want to address that as council member?
I mean, there are a number of things that we have got to do better. And I think what came out of yesterday's council meeting is the lack of involvement and having those who are most affected with being unhoused at the table. And so I think that's something that we've got to do a better job. We cannot continue to create policies and programs or decide how funding will be allocated without those who are most impacted and are experiencing it or are actively involved in serving and showing up strong for that community, not in those early discussions. There was a lack of what community felt was a lack of transparency, a lack of sufficient public dialogue and discussion. One meeting is not enough to craft a policy. And so there's a task force that's been developed. And so we've got to really look at how we work with community on these policies so that we're not being reactive and trying to come up with things to make up and compensate for not making good, wise, sound decisions from the beginning. But there are a number of things that, you know, when I think about how we serve and show up in the community, we've got to really make some more committed financial decisions in housing. We've made a $50 million commitment in this last budget cycle for homeless services, homeless shelters and care, and we know that that's not enough money. And so there are a number of tenant ordinances, there are a number of moratoriums that have been supported, but we've got to find some other creative approaches with the existing policies to build deeply affordable homes, to ensure that there is sufficient low-income housing for those who are our most vulnerable residents. We've got to work to reallocate funding, as we're talking about OPD, reallocate funding from that department also towards building and creating some deeper and higher AMI affordable housing. We've got vacant property of our own, and so we've got surplus land, and so we've got to look at the assets that we do own and where we can begin making decisions to convert that outside of passing and enforcing policies. We've got to take a look at what we've got. We've got to build more transit-oriented development, right? We've got to keep people who are dependent on transit and working near those opportunities to have access and to have a walkable opportunity to get to transit, get to their job, and take care of their family. There are too many people that are unhoused, that are hungry, and that are struggling. And so we've got to expand rental assistance, mortgage subsidies, emergency response programs during COVID. We've been able to advocate for COVID care funding, and we still need more. We've got to work with our regional partners. I mean, there's a regional allocation plan that we've not met. We've only achieved 14% of our regional allocation for affordable homes. That's not sufficient. That's not showing that housing is a human right. That's not showing that housing is our priority. And so we've got to align our decisions with the policies and the positions that we're stating. And we've been able to do some of that. You know, in Dan Cobb's district, they just converted a dormitory. And an organization that I work with may have an opportunity to work in partnership with that, but providing permanent housing solutions with existing development. I'm not sure how many corporations are going to return to business as usual with their current real estate. And so there may be opportunity to look at what other types of properties that will come on the market that can be rezoned for providing housing now for families. And I'm looking forward to hearing and coming to the table with the other council members, with our county leaders, with our state leaders, our federal leaders, and talk about the creative approaches that we can have. I got my first home, you know, just talking about my family on my dad's side. My cousin and I were the first ones to own a home out of like our cousins and our aunts and uncles. And we both built homes. So we didn't even just come into home ownership, but we had the opportunity to really experience building a home. And that came through an affordable home ownership program where there were tax abatements, there was local state funding, there was PMI assistance, down payment assistance at the city level. And so we've got to find some of those creative ways to bring our community also into wealth equity so that we can help sustain families from one generation to the next generation. And that is something that I will also advocate for from that seat.
Hey, I'm going to get your opinion on something that has been a big thing, particularly with our mutual friend John Jones, and it's the bus rapid transit system, and they had fears. How's it going from your perspective right now that it's, you know, operational?
It's operational. It came with a great cost. I mean, I sat at the tables that John was leading with community and our local leaders, and it was disheartening to hear again how we created, you know, something that could potentially, from what the intentions were, be beneficial to community without community at the table. This year alone, we've lost in District 7 over 100 businesses. Now, whether that's all due to COVID or it was coming as a result of other decisions that we've made and not fully investing into the community or the impacts of the bus rapid transit project, and a number of businesses who were not able to sustain themselves during the construction phase. A number of businesses that were not able to sustain themselves with how decisions were made to red line in front of their businesses for blocks and preventing people who would support their business from feeling like they had a place where they could park and have easy access to come in. And so we've done some things that have caused some harm to businesses, not having businesses at the table before we launched these initiatives and invested significant fundings or got significant state and federal grants. And so I just think it speaks to, coming back, talking to community after the fact and being reactive in a number of those approaches. And so the BRT, there are businesses who are still trying to get funding to mitigate the impacts from their businesses. There's money available, but there's some policy processes in there that have been challenging for businesses to be able to submit and apply. There are language barriers, there are technical assistance barriers. And so those are some of the things, even that what we're seeing at the federal level with the PPP funds, that we have got to put different systems in place to really support the community that we serve. And technical assistance is one of those issues. Having someone that can hear you and help you get through that process and navigate through that process without being frustrated and stopped, that's an issue. And so we have got to show up better. We did not show up well with the BRT.
And I have to explain something. I apologize for the reaction when you mentioned the PPP, but as one of, Zennie62 to me is one of 2%. Only 2% of PPP funds went to Black businesses. Mine was one of them. But
wow.
But here's the problem, okay? And it really impacts Oakland too, regardless of color. But in particular, it does impact us because lenders are losing money on the PPP. They've altered the rules so that they haven't put out to you an email to say, "Hey, fill this out so you can forgive your funds." And the ones that they did, particularly for those who received, like my company, less than $50,000, they're asking you to essentially almost reapply for items that they knew you got as a condition of having your loan erased or forgiven, if you will. And what I believe is going on is that they're trying to reduce the number of businesses that they have loans to be forgiven. And it's something that I'm saying to everybody to watch out for, because the current administration in the White House didn't allot enough funds to administer the program for large businesses, and they're losing money. CFO of Bank of America openly said that they weren't making money. And now I believe they're in a crisis. And so I just want to point that out to you and everybody else as something to have the government fix, just putting that out there.
I mean, those are unprecedented impacts due to COVID, unprecedented impacts prior to COVID. And so we've got to really fight for the economic justice to help sustain our business. The COVID care funding, although there have been some anti-displacement funding that we have worked to secure through our city leaders and our state leaders, that is not sufficient to take care of our businesses. Our chambers have not had all the help that they have needed, and they've had to come up with creative ways. Like you've heard the Black Chamber and just the initiative that they've launched to help businesses within their network. And you're seeing that from a lot of the ethnic chambers. And that's because we have not been able to support those communities of color. One of the things that the Black Cultural Zone has lifted up is a $100 million grant for businesses that would help entrepreneurs and artists, those who nonprofit groups that did not get the type of funding that they needed at the federal level. But for us to create a $100 million grant for those nonprofits to help them sustain, help these grassroots organizations who are serving many in our vulnerable community to have what they need during COVID and beyond COVID. And so we've got to come up with a different type of strategy and how we support the small businesses who make up our community to make sure that their doors remain open, that they have the resources that they need, that they have the access to the insurance that they need to bring stability. And we just got to take a different approach with that. And so, I'm gonna give you a link. I'm trying to see if I can pull it up now for you to have more information on some of the things that we have talked about for economic development to really help to keep families and businesses sustained during these times.
Sure. I can actually pull it up here too.
Well, you know what? One of the easiest places to go is if you go to BWAPA on their page. Under their blog, it listed, and you'll see Black Cultural Zone, you'll see Green Line Institute, and you'll see my name. It talks about, doesn't necessarily talk about the city's $4 million in anti-displacement funding and the nonprofit support funding, but it talks about ways that we need to approach strengthening and sustaining our business. I mean, we've got some ballot measures that will help us do that as well. We've got Prop 15, closing a loophole on corporations that will bring 700 million annually, over 700 million annually back into Alameda County to to help us in the area of offsetting some of the costs, where the city may also be sharing in those costs now that we can get the benefit of dollars coming back into the county. We've got the census that's still before us. And so just encouraging people to still complete their census so that we can get the billions of dollars that come into the state, where 60% of our Alameda County funding comes through those dollars, to make sure that we can help strengthen a safety net for families, for seniors, for children, for projects like the transportation projects that the guest mentioned. But if you look on that, it talks about, are you there? You find
Yeah,
it?
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, so Lenise Jones and I are Skyline class of 80, but just
Oh, well, Lenise is our fantabulous president, and Desi Woods Jones, Miss Honorable Desi Woods Jones, who's the former council member for this district and vice mayor. They're leaders locally and at the state level for BWAPA, but you'll see in there, it talks about some of our short-term goals, which is making sure that we support our frontline, our grassroots nonprofits who are responding real time in the midst of this crisis. When COVID took place, we lacked the sufficient PPE that we needed. Roots Health, Community Health Center, East Oakland Collective, a number of grassroots organizations who were serving did not have the mutual aid nor the ability to make sure that we were covered, that we were protected, that they were protected as essential and frontline workers. And so it talks about some of those needs that we continue to have for our frontline healers and essential employees, particularly those who are serving those who are economically vulnerable, and making sure we got testing sites and contract testing going forward.
Is there a particular tab that I go to find that? Because I'm trying to get that specific area you wanted me to go to here, because she's got VEEP to the community, caring for our community, Adopt Today, the power of the Black vote. But everything is, for those who want to find this, folks, this is the URL right here. And there it is. See that? There's the URL. It's bwaptalaleads.org. And I also, if you will go and simply search on Google as well for BWAPA, and just search on Google for BWAPA like that. All you have to do is type that in Google like this, folks, and it'll come up as I did here. And then you press return. There it is. And then it's the first result. And voila, there's the website. So that's where you can go to find out all the initiatives that
it used to be on the homepage at the bottom, and I'm not seeing it here, Zennie.
Oh, it's because it's constantly updated. They got a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. There are a lot of initiatives that are going on, but I'll have to make sure that we get you that link. But I mean, it talks about things like even just another critical component of our community and our resilience for our small businesses, having the economic engine of a bank that supports our business. And it's a great opportunity. We had a Black-owned bank back in the day in Oakland. You remember? Yep. And having to ensure that we've got the resilience of those who will help to serve those who are underbanked, and bringing them into a place of recovery, supporting those small businesses, supporting those entrepreneurial initiatives, helping to create the economic stimulus into the communities of color supported through that type of banking system, I think is going to be critical. And having that serve as a community benefit. When you talk about companies that come into town, have them invest in that type of long-term generational equity that can be sustained, like their companies. We've got companies that are 100 years old. We want families to be able to be sustained for years. And I think having things like that critical component of a bank that's built to support communities of color and to make sure there's equity in financing and investment is going to be critical for us as we move through this next season.
And
so you'll see a highlight on that. transparency in data collection. We've talked about some statewide bans on the criminal background checks. You talk about John Jones. We got to partner with him in making sure that the Fair Chance Housing Coalition was supported in ensuring that even those who have a criminal record would not be shut out or have barriers to housing stability. And so seeing those type of ordinances and work being led out by community has been incredible to partner with them, and making sure that we've got rent and mortgage subsidies to keep them housed, and making sure that they've got jobs, that we have an industry of STEAM and STEM fields coming into this community, into perhaps the Coliseum corridor, so that we can have a green corridor and that we can train up our youth at an early age to be able to take hold of the jobs, take hold of the career path, take hold of the educational opportunities, and fully invest in them.
I said 30 minutes. We're at 45 minutes. So I'm going to cut off, which could be a 5-hour conversation.
Well, this has been great talking with you. I know we talked about a lot of general areas. We can certainly follow up. Again, you can follow up after the 3rd, believing Absolutely. That the 3rd will be an incredible time of victory for our campaign. We've been working hard. I have an amazing team. I have, almost 500 people who've supported me even financially in this committee, this opportunity to run. Most of them are all from Oakland who are contributing. So that always feel good to know that the people around you are invested in you to help lead the change that we desire and that we're demanding in this time.
Even me. So for those who see my name, I put in $25, but
Ooh, bless me. That's like hitting the lottery. When people give their money, I'm telling you, I celebrate and shout down $5 and $25 like I do $50 or $500 or the max of $900. Like, this is just one of those moments for me. I mean, I posted on Facebook today. It took me a few days, Zennie, to open up my ballot. Like, it took me, I got the ballot and I needed to process, like, wow, this moment is finally here. This moment is real. Like, my name is on a ballot. When I see different mailers that come in and I'm looking at my face alongside leaders that I've supported, that I've canvassed, that I've door knocked for, or that I've worked for, it is an amazing feeling for me to know that I will have the opportunity, if elected by the voters, to work in such a way that would honor them and uplift the values that we're really fighting for in this season, and that we're fighting for people to be able to live and thrive through this season.
Come on back. We talk some more.
I'll come back. I know my son's coming in. I'm probably a little distorted on that end with just being able to.
No. We'll have you back. And hey, stick around backstage. Treva, don't go anywhere. Folks, thanks for watching, and share this around. And audience, thank you for the questions. And subscribe to Zennie62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com. And I want to say one thing, everybody, to watch, okay? I want everybody out there to combat media racism. It's too much of it. It puts Black folks in a bad light because there's basically, other than myself and one other person, there's no Black media ownership. That's a bad thing. There should be a ton of Black media ownership. You should be making your own Twitter account. It's not Twitter accounts, Twitter platforms. You can, PHP like I do, you can do it. I've done it. Other people can do it. Make your own damn platforms and don't leave it to somebody else, be it Mark Zuckerberg, whose foot accidentally stepped on, or Kevin Systrom, who created Instagram, or anybody else. Make your own platforms. The Obama campaign did the first time. Remember that, Treva, with BarackObama.com? That was their own, all right? Make your own news. Make your own news and criticize others who would be racist. That's how we get change, all right?
All about, and readforoakland.com, and my Instagram is Read for Oakland, and my Facebook is Treva Reid for Oakland City Council. So please stay plugged in with me. And Zennie, thank you for this incredible time. We've known each other for a while, and I'm grateful that I have your support and just the encouragement that you're giving me in the process of running to win. So let's win this race together. We're almost there.
Stick around. Hey, folks, again, thank you very much. And that ends this broadcast.